You're listening to the Mommy Labor Nurse podcast, where you'll gain the tools, knowledge, and confidence you need to erase the unknowns, feel in control, and have an even better birth no matter how you deliver. My name is Liesl Teen, mom of two, practicing labor and delivery nurse, and your host. From over 8 years and counting of working at the bedside, I know that knowledge is the key to an even better birth. So tune in each week to learn about all things pregnancy, birth, and postpartum from me, a labor and delivery nurse that's seen it all. And now let's get into this week's episode. Hello, and welcome back to the Mommy Labor Nurse podcast. This week, you guys, I have an episode with her name is Robin Hilmantel. She is the Senior Director of Editorial Strategy and Growth at, guess where? BabyCenter. Yeah, you guys know BabyCenter. They are a leading brand out there in the pregnancy and birth space, doing a lot of really great things. But Robin came on today to talk to us about a lot of really cool things. And she is not only a leader in the parenting media world, but she is also a mom of 3 boys. So she, she's like one of us, right? Um, so her extensive experience in both her professional field and her personal life, I thought would bring a unique episode, unique perspective to the Mommy Labor Nurse podcast. So that's why I wanted to have her on. So today we dove into some really fascinating data at BabyCenter's latest research on crucial topics like postpartum care, the high cost of childcare, and the challenges of maintaining personal identity as a mom. Yeah, all stuff we can really relate. I mean, I can really relate to that. I'm so thrilled to have Robin here to talk to you guys about this and share her insights, discuss this stuff with me. So yeah, let's get into it. Hi, Robin. Welcome to the Mommy Labor Nurse podcast. Thank you so much for being here today with me.
Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, I'm so excited to talk today. Can you tell our listeners a little bit about yourself, your family, where are you from, what you eat for breakfast, anything you want to share?
Yeah, absolutely. What did I have for breakfast this morning? Cereal. Not very interesting.
Not very interesting. I had a banana and had a protein shake. So I was
Okay.
good this morning, but I'm a cereal lover too, so I get it.
Yeah. Like a lot of moms, I imagine it was like short order cooking for
Yes.
my kids, and then cereal's just easy once I was done with that.
Yes.
But yeah, so I am on the editorial team at Baby Center, creating all of the content within the app and on our website. And then at home, I'm a mom to 3 boys. I have a 5-year-old, a 3-year-old, and a 1-year-old. So it's only myself and my dog in the house, the ladies of the household, and I'm outnumbered otherwise. But yeah, it's a wild ride, but great to be able to use my home life also to inform what I do at work and vice versa.
Yeah, very cool. Well, we're big fans of BabyCenter here at Mommy Labor Nurse. You guys put out so many great things, and we're talking about postpartum care today and you've had 3 kids. I've had 2 kids. You've had 3 kids. We know firsthand how hard that period is.
Yeah.
So we're going to be talking a little bit today about that. And I know that BabyCenter did conduct some research, right, on postpartum care and kind of the gaps and just why we feel like we're failing moms in that period. So can you start by telling us just a little bit about that research and the main findings?
Yeah, absolutely. So it kind of started with, we noticed we have the Baby Center community where we're just getting hundreds and hundreds of posts a day from parents, and it can be about anything. But we noticed this kind of common theme emerging of parents in the postpartum period just being like, what is going on? I wasn't expecting a lot of these symptoms. I wasn't expecting the severity of them and how long they would last. And I think that's just a real like shock to the system. So we partnered actually with Emily Oster from Parent Data, and she had noticed similar anecdotal reports from her followers. And so we collaborated on a survey because it's the type of thing where you hear people talking about it, right? But it's so much more powerful sometimes to put numbers to that.
Yep.
So, what we found that was really most striking from this survey of about 2,000 new moms is that 65% left the hospital feeling prepared to take care of their newborn,
Mhm.
but only 47% felt prepared to take care of themselves. So that disparity, I think, really like encapsulates a common theme that we see among a lot of new moms is that it just feels like the emphasis is on the baby a lot of the time. And,
Yep.
I mean, it is exciting. You have a new baby, and it's exciting and scary and all the things. But moms often feel like left out of this conversation. And that's just unacceptable. We need to make sure that moms are being taken care of in the postpartum period, too.
Absolutely. It reminds me of that analogy. Have you heard the candy wrapper analogy with
No, I haven't
postpartum?
heard this
Oh,
one.
it's a great analogy. So it's so true. So like the
Mhm.
baby is the candy and mom is the
Mhm.
wrapper. So like we unwrap the wrapper, right? And like we want the candy
Yes.
because the candy is really good and we take care of the candy because we eat it, right? But we just throw the wrapper away.
Yeah, yeah. I
Just we're just
mean,
thrown in the
wow.
trash.
That is a powerful analogy.
I mean, it's so true. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I know you've had three kiddos, so can you share your personal postpartum care experiences and how they kind of aligned with what you guys have found at Baby Center?
Yeah. So I mean, I think the thing that was like there were a lot of things that were shocking when I first became a mom, as I'm sure any
Yeah,
parent can relate to.
sure.
It's just like true like shock to the system. And to some extent, I truly do think there's nothing that will like fully prepare you for that. And every postpartum experience is different, every baby is different. So it's hard to I think a lot of women end up feeling like, why didn't anyone tell me? And it's
Yeah,
hard. You can't tell someone exactly what their experience will be like. But the thing that really struck me that was very tangible about this is just like, oh my goodness, how many doctor's appointments do you have immediately following his birth? I remember we chose our pediatrician because they were like a 2-minute walk. I lived in New York at the time, from our apartment, and we had been warned that there would be all of these appointments, like a day or two after you come home from the hospital, and then like a few days later, and then a
mm-hmm.
week later. Versus for the mom, the common scenario is you get one postpartum checkup at 6 weeks.
Exactly. Yeah,
Yeah. And so I think that just really highlights kind of like that sends a message to that the baby is what deserves all the care. And it's also, those are all opportunities for practitioners, to provide support and education. And you can bring up symptoms that you might be worried about with your baby. And it's just not as frictionless like that when you're the patient who's only being seen at 6 weeks postpartum.
yeah.
In our story about all of our postpartum research, we have an anecdote from a mom who felt like she was suffering from anxiety, and she did take the initiative to message her provider. And she got what she thought was like a dismissive response, which was basically like, here's I can't remember if it was a psychologist or psychiatrist, but here's someone you could try to reach out to. They
Mm-hmm.
were out of network for this woman. She just felt like she was kind of like the rapper again, being cast aside, and
Thrown all over the
yeah,
place.
like passed along. And that I don't think this was necessarily her OB's intention, but kind of like, okay, I'm done here. I've passed you on to someone else.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think I that was not my anecdote, but I definitely was struck by there's just like not a lot of institutional support built in for postpartum moms. I mean, really hardly any.
Yeah.
Um, so obviously, having gone through the experience 3 times, you do, each time feel like, okay, I've been through this before. That prior experience does help in some ways. But what I thought was also interesting about our survey is that it was more pronounced among first time moms. They felt like they
Mm.
had even like less of the support and information they needed leaving the hospital about to take care of themselves. But it's still, that number that I quoted you, only 47% feel prepared. That is all moms, like
Yeah.
many of the people in our survey were second and third time moms, and the
Yeah.
support isn't there, sadly.
Totally. Now, was that number, were you asking them before they gave birth or were you asking them
No, this was
afterwards?
after. Yeah.
Afterwards. Okay. Okay.
Mhm.
Just checking. I
Yeah,
would
and
wonder
we
if it's like, if it's higher beforehand. I'd wonder like if there was a big difference beforehand.
So we did ask, not exactly what you're getting at, but we asked basically like, did you feel like you got all the support you needed during labor and delivery,
Mm-hmm.
after you were discharged from the hospital,
Mm-hmm.
and at these kind of like various touch points,
Mm-hmm.
starting with labor and delivery.
Mm-hmm.
And what we saw was a clear decline. People felt like they had the most support for themselves during the labor and delivery process, which I think makes a certain amount of sense, right? You have
Sure.
like a nurse checking in on you regularly, and
Right.
as you are very, very familiar with. And so, but yeah, it just like drops off a cliff once you
Yeah.
leave the hospital, basically.
Yeah, I know. That's why we have a whole section in our birth courses like, hey guys, labor and delivery is important and it's hard and we got to prep for it. But postpartum, it's way longer and it might not be as painful, right? I mean, there's some painful things about postpartum. Let's not, we're not, let's be truthful, but
Yeah.
we got to prep for this period too. It's not just birth.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting you say that because I remember when I was pregnant with my first, one of my colleagues who had just returned from maternity leave made some comment about like the first 6 weeks were so hard. And I remember I was like in my head, like, all I've been worried about is labor. Like, labor is this
Yeah.
big, scary, unknown thing to me, and I don't know how I'm going to handle that. But I just had not devoted any brain space to thinking about postpartum. And yeah, it just, once I got there, I was like, wow, yeah, labor is finite, and
Right.
postpartum
It's forever.
goes on for a very long time.
I mean, it pretty much is forever. Like when do you're a parent now forever, and it's
Mhm.
like it's almost like you're a super you're right. I mean, yes, you're postpartum right when it first happens, but then it's like, how do we get out of this postpartum and transition back into like normal life? I wish
Yes,
somebody would
yes, or
just
your
teach
new
me that.
normal. Yeah.
Right,
There's
right.
no going back to exactly how it was before.
I know, I know. Well, what would you say from the research that you guys did? What are
Mhm.
some steps that new moms can take to better prepare for their own care during the postpartum period? Because I feel like we've already, you've already touched on this a little
Mhm.
bit, but the institutions aren't quite there
Yeah.
yet. So we got to take matter into our own hands, right?
Yeah, and I mean, I think that's a really good call out because really this should not be on moms to
No,
fix, right? Like,
no.
we should have the systemic support, and it's
Yes.
unacceptable that we don't. However, this is our reality.
Right.
So what can you do?
Right.
Um, in our survey, the thing that we found that was really most powerful was, and it's a big if you have access to this, taking parental leave.
Mm-hmm.
So the women in our survey who took 13 or more weeks of parental leave were significantly less likely to suffer symptoms of anxiety. And then if you look at the flip side of that, the people who did not take any leave were 89% more likely to suffer symptoms of anxiety.
Well, that's surprising.
So yeah, yeah, not super surprising, but it is a situation where if you work for a company where and you're like can afford to take leave, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Depending on your situation, definitely take it and take as much as you can because it does also seem like taking a longer amount is helpful. And then we also found that people whose partners took leave were significantly less likely to suffer from moderate or severe anxiety. So, we looked at different support systems that are helpful to parents and what was correlated with better outcomes. And that was really the one that was the most striking. If you have a partner and they have access to leave, and I think this one also is maybe an area where we can be more helpful to help spark conversation, because I know in a lot of, traditionally like male partner scenarios where there might be like technically a policy where they have access to leave, but they
Mm-hmm.
feel like the norm culturally is that they can't take it.
Yeah.
It is so important to try to encourage your partner to actually take it. I mean, literally, like your health could
Yeah.
depend on it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well said. And yeah, the way I'm hearing it is like, if you got it, take it, and if you think you might have it, take it. Like, look into
Yes.
it, take it.
Yes. Yes, exactly. And I mean, these policies can be really confusing. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not like I know it's easier said than done. But
Yeah.
definitely if you think you might have it, you know, talk to your employer to find out the specifics. And sometimes also, even if there's not a policy saying explicitly, like you have access to this amount of leave, or you want more than what the policy says,
Yeah.
it's worth asking for sure, because they
Totally.
might say no, but they might say yes. So, and again, this was like the strongest factor that we found in our research correlated with better postpartum outcomes.
All right, the sound of that heartbeat means it's time for this week's segment of Birth It Up Babies. This one says, I can't say thank you enough for your awesome course. I'm 2 weeks postpartum and I'm still so proud of myself for making it through labor naturally. I could never have done it without all your tips and tricks. You do such a great job of giving actual tools that can help. This was my second baby and I went in so much more confident and informed than with my first. My husband was also so much more prepared to be a bigger help to me. Thank you. Thank you. I'm glad you mentioned the tools too, because that is one thing that I hate when I take classes and you're like, okay, but what do I actually do? Right? So when I created this course, I was like, okay, I want like actionable stuff. I need I need to like I want to give you guys like stuff like tools, right? Like I don't want you to ever go away from the class and be like, I don't know what, but okay, that was great, but like what do I actually do? So I'm glad she actually brought up specifically mentioned tools, because that is something that I'm proud to have in the course. And if you want to have an even better birth, just like this mama, head on over to mommylabornurse.com/courses to get lifetime access to all 3 of my online birth classes. Not, like I said, not surprised to hear that, because
Yeah.
I mean, you got to be all hands on deck, I feel like.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
yes. Well,
And the other big thing I would say, sorry to jump in there,
you're okay.
but the other big thing that I would say to keep in mind during that postpartum period is what we see a lot, especially in the community, moms vocalize this, is they have some kind of postpartum symptom and they're not sure if it's
Hmm.
normal or not, because you've never gone through this before. Like, how would you know? Frankly, I think the level of bleeding that is considered like normal
Hmm.
is shocking to a lot of women.
Yeah.
So, if you do even like ask about a symptom and you're told like, oh, that's normal, don't worry about it, you might naturally feel less likely to raise a flag if you're experiencing another symptom that seems weird to you.
Yeah.
Um, but if anything seems off or you're concerned about it, like you should always, always ask your provider and never feel silly about that, because there is a very fine line between what is an expected symptom and what is a sign that something is seriously wrong.
Hmm.
So again, like there should be more systems in place to help proactively spot when something's wrong, but unfortunately, there's a lot of gaps there.
Yeah.
So we as women have to advocate for ourselves.
Yeah. Yes, absolutely. Couldn't agree more. Well, let's transition now to
Mhm.
the actual postpartum period. Do
Yeah.
you have any practical tips for moms to help manage their self-care during this
Mhm.
period that is so demanding, that we know is so, so demanding.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I think like speaking from my personal experience, is the biggest thing was asking for the help I needed.
Yeah.
And yeah, I felt like definitely some hesitancy around that in the beginning. But I remember with my first son, I think my in-laws were supposed to come when he was like 2 weeks old. That was the plan.
Mm,
And then he actually spent a few days in the NICU, not very long. I think it was
mm,
like 5 days. We took him home. We're like extra excited because
yeah.
what good news. He's been discharged from the NICU. And then he, like a lot of newborns, did not sleep at all, really, except when we were holding him. And he was on the fussy side. And I can say that now that I've had 3 kids.
Yeah.
And so we were just like, what are we doing? Like that
Yeah.
lack of sleep hits you very quickly. And I kind of like honestly went behind my husband's back and called my mother-in-law and was like, hey, is there any way you can come earlier? And she was
Yeah.
amazing and did come, and that
Oh,
made such a huge difference. But yeah, I think, this is not the time to be shy about using your support network. And I think another thing is just kind of like knowing who in your support network is going to be helpful to you in these moments and not,
mm,
I have like some relatives also who like I knew wouldn't be as helpful and they wanted to meet the baby ASAP, but you should feel empowered to create those boundaries you need and at the same time like ask for the support that you need. It sounds like such a no-brainer and like honestly it is, but it's something that a lot of new moms struggle with and it can make a huge difference.
yeah. Like you don't have to have Aunt Sally come over in the first week after you have
Yes.
a baby, especially if Aunt Sally's coming over and bringing dinner and she's going to come and do my laundry and help me
Yeah.
and do all the things,
Right.
right? Aunt Sally can come over, but if Aunt Sally just wants to come over because she wants to come over and she's not coming over to really help me and all, then I can say,
Right.
hey, Aunt Sally, you no. And that's
You
fine.
can say no, and like you bring up a great point also with like mentioning laundry and cooking. Like you
Mm-hmm.
can also say like, "Hey, what I could really use right now is someone to come do some
Yeah.
laundry," or like, "Is there any way you could pick up dinner?" And just be really specific about what would be helpful.
Right.
Everyone wants to come hold the baby, and there will be time for them to hold the baby, but yeah, that's not necessarily going to be helpful to you in the moment. So don't be
Yeah.
afraid to tell them what will be.
Right, because generally I would say most people do want to help, right? So that's a
Mhm.
good tip though, is to be specific, because I think sometimes people are like, okay, but they don't really know what you need or how to help you. And it really is on us to say, hey, I need this. And that's
Yes.
okay,
Yeah.
you
Right.
know?
No,
So
absolutely. Like I know my mom, she thought it would be like, "Oh, can I hold the baby to give you
right,
a break and like you can take a nap or something." But the truth was that's not what I needed, so
right.
I kind of had to be like, "Oh, actually, could you put the dishes in the dishwasher?" And it's just it would be great if people were mind readers and knew what you needed, but that's just not reality. So it's not bad to be specific. It's really helpful, actually.
Yeah, totally. Well, we talked a little bit about support and support
Mhm.
networks. Um, what would you say are some other types of support specifically that moms should seek out? And I want to get into the
Mhm.
childcare impacts too, because I know you have some stats for me about childcare and how crazy expensive childcare is,
Yeah,
because that's a whole other conversation of support and
I
how to
know.
go about paying for that and blah.
Yeah, honestly, we could do a whole other episode on that.
Yes.
No, yeah. I mean, I think like another key thing to do to feel supported during this time is it's great to connect with other new moms whose babies
Yeah.
are similar
Yeah.
age to you. And so one way that Baby Center helps with this actually is when you sign up, you're put into a birth month club with in our community with other moms who are have either a due date the same month as you or whose babies were born the same month as yours. And it's just like so profound to be able to say to someone else like, hey, my baby's doing this weird thing, is yours? Like, or
Yep.
even just to have someone to say, my baby only woke up 3 times last night, like that was an improvement for me, and have
Yep.
someone to celebrate that with who really gets it and is in it with you. So that's huge.
Yeah. Yeah. No, totally. What about childcare? Let's talk about
Yes.
childcare and how crazy, crazy expensive it is, because I don't know the number, but I know how much I pay a month, and I'm not even like my older one is in school now, but I remember
Yeah.
like daycare costs and nannies and all of this and it's just wild.
It's so expensive, and I think more than that also something that, or not more than that, it's really like shocking to a lot of people how expensive it is. But also another factor to consider that I think sometimes surprises people even more is how difficult it can be to find a spot
Oh,
in a childcare
coordinating it
center.
too. Yes. Oh.
Yeah. So what ends up happening is we did a separate study, also of about 2,000 parents, and we found that parents face it's not uncommon to be on one or more wait lists before you get in, and the
Yeah.
average wait list time when parents were on them is 6 months.
Wow.
So I would recommend, and I know this can sound extreme when you have like just gotten that positive pregnancy test, but I would recommend not waiting too long to start looking into daycares and to the extent that you can afford it or have the like mental bandwidth to do this, put your child on a few different wait lists for places that you think you might be interested in, because this will, not only give you an option, hopefully,
Yeah.
um, a lot of wait lists can be longer than the length of a pregnancy. So
I know.
it's just what you need to do. But also in an ideal scenario, this means you have choices, right? So
Good
getting back
point.
to the cost, a lot of moms in this survey told us they feel their childcare expenses are exorbitant, but they also had no ability to shop around because
Mm.
there's just, not that many. They had like one place they got off the wait list for. So getting on multiple wait lists, doing it really early is the best thing. And what we did find, I have not forgotten about your question about cost, is that the average parent who's putting their child in daycare or some type of childcare full time is paying almost $17,000 a year
That's
for that.
crazy. I mean, that's
It's it's so expensive. But the fact is like it's not like these teachers or and staff are getting paid.
no.
They're not getting paid very well. There's just no way to make the math add up where both teachers are getting paid like fair living wages and parents have really affordable options without systemic support.
Yeah.
And you look at other countries where there's government subsidies or government provided childcare. That's really the only way it works. And I will say, depending on which state you live in or which county you live in, sometimes I always recommend looking into their options for scholarships for
Oh,
daycare and childcare. It sounds a little funny, right? But there you can get childcare vouchers. Again, the exact program, or if there are programs, is going to vary based on where you live. But it's definitely something worth looking into.
that's a good point. I knew about vouchers, right? But I didn't know that was even an option. I randomly thought about this for a podcast episode. I feel like I want to have a daycare owner on here just to break down some, because I'm like, because you're right.
Mhm.
I know a few daycare workers, and like I don't know exactly how much they get paid, but I can
Mhm.
imagine. I mean, we can Google stuff, right? We know how much they get paid and the amount of staff and how, and then I'm like, okay, how many kids are in a class? And then when you add up the math, you're like, wait, so how much does it? Where's the money? I would just be interested to know where the money is going and like
Mhm.
why do I have to pay this much money to have my child here? I just it I would love for somebody to explain that to me.
Yeah, I mean, we've covered childcare a lot at Baby Center,
Mm-hmm.
and I mean, I will say like they're between thinking about, right, like you have to pay to rent or own a facility. There's like
Sure.
the upkeep of it. There's what you're paying the teachers and the director. There's oftentimes the food.
Sure. Sure.
Yeah, there are all these things, and like there really is just no way to make the math add up
Yeah.
where, like I said, both parents are getting a reasonable price and staff are
Yeah.
being paid fairly.
Paid. Yeah.
Yeah,
I know.
and I think it's just we need more systemic support, unfortunately.
It sounds like it. Sounds like it. Well, you've mentioned that Baby Center has these months, right? That you sign up, and
Mhm.
that's a great way
Mhm.
to for Baby Center to help support moms in this postpartum period. Because there's nothing
Mhm.
like like you said, there's nothing like somebody you can be like, hey, my baby woke up this many times a night, and somebody's like, yes, my baby woke up this many times a night, right? That is worth its weight in gold, I feel like.
Yes.
How is Baby Center, any other ways that Baby Center is working to support moms in this postpartum period in addition to that?
Yeah, I mean, we create a ton of content, and one of the things that, Baby Center users say they love most about our app and our newsletters is that we are delivering exactly the articles that we know moms at your stage have found the most useful. When you're immediately postpartum, you might find in your app or your newsletter an article about like warning signs to watch out for when you're postpartum.
Mm-hmm.
When your baby is 2 weeks old, your newsletter is all about what's happening with a
Yeah.
2 week old baby. And so um, we just have a huge library of content, which on its own I think would be overwhelming. But what we've really tried to do is like deliver it to you at exactly the right time. So you're getting what you need in that moment and not more than that if you're not ready for more than of course you can go exploring more on the site, but that you have like a digestible amount of information.
Yeah.
Everything is medically reviewed, so it's really reliable information. And just that really is what we view as our role, arming moms with information that they can then take to say, oh, like I might have one of these warning signs. Like maybe I should go get this checked out. Or they can feel confident, like, oh, my baby's not smiling yet, but you know what? They're not supposed to be. Like, I feel
Yeah.
better about this. Yeah.
Yes, exactly. Realistic expectations, right?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
also just I mean, I would agree that it's can be overwhelming just going on a website and just being like, okay, postpartum, right? There's all this
Yes.
stuff. And so there
Uh-huh.
is such a value in having it like tailored to you, right? And like
Yes.
given to you, like here's what you need to be, thinking about right now, or here's some tip,
Mhm.
and just you don't have to think about the other stuff. We'll think about the other stuff when we
Right.
need to think about the other
Yes.
stuff.
When we get there.
Yeah,
Exactly.
exactly. Well, what would you say, based on your insights and research, are some trends maybe that you see emerging in the area of postpartum care over the next few years?
Yeah, I mean, one of the things we've seen that's kind of interesting is that, unlike my experience where I was like shocked to, like, someone was like, those first 6 weeks are hard. I was like, I'm not even thinking about those first 6 weeks.
Yeah,
Um, there is a little bit of a growing awareness about the troubles of postpartum period, which I love seeing that more moms are becoming aware. That means that we're doing our job and other voices out there are speaking about it. And one of the interesting ways that that's manifesting is that on baby registries, moms are starting to register more for some postpartum items.
Mm.
So, as you know very well, at the hospital, they give you, the mesh underwear, the peri bottle, everything. But it's a growing trend to kind of invest in nicer versions of those.
Mm.
And so not only are moms doing that, but more and more we're seeing them registering for it to, I think this is great. Like, ask for what they need from their
Yeah.
support network.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you so much, Robin. This was fabulous. Can you, I mean, we've said Baby Center a million times, but can you remind our listeners maybe where they can find you on social media? I'm sure it's babycenter.com that they can
Yes.
go and just see all of your resources, but tell us where people can connect with you.
Yes, I would definitely recommend downloading the Baby Center app. It is free, and like I said, that will give you the most customized experience
Cool.
specifically for the stage that you're in. Babycenter.com also, as you mentioned, you can find all of our content there. And then we're on Instagram, X, and TikTok as Baby Center, Pinterest as well. I mean, all the major
All the
social
things.
media networks. Basically, yeah, all the things, and on all of them, our handle is Baby Center.
Awesome. Awesome. I have the Baby Center app with both my pregnancies, so I can say, yes, go download it. It's gold. So thank you, Robin, for joining me.
Yeah.
This is an absolute pleasure.
This was so great. Thank you so much for having me.
Already feeling a little more confident about pregnancy, birth, and newborn life? Don't forget to hit that subscribe button so you can continue to erase the unknowns and never miss an episode. And if you're looking for even more, Instagram is definitely where I hang out the most. Come join our community of more than 500,000 moms for birth education, tips, and solidarity. You can find me at mommy.labornurse. Check out today's show notes and a searchable library of every Mommy Labor Nurse podcast episode at mommylabornurse.com/podcast. And while you're there, be sure to head to the blog to learn about our online birth classes too. See you next week, and remember, you can have an even better birth no matter how you deliver.